Howdy. This is Mission Texas,
a political podcast about winning Texas by 2032, or else we may lose the White House for a generation.
I'm one of your hosts, Alex Clark.
And I am Kate Rumsey.
Other podcasts may focus on the day-to-day or the next election, but we are keeping the eyes of Texas on the bigger prize. What happens after the next census?
All right, really excited about our next guest. She is the vice chair of the Texas House Democratic Caucus. She is one of the few Democrats in Collin County, north of Dallas. She is also one of the people that broke quorum, which you may have heard of her on the news. And she just happens to be my old classmate from public schools. I've got the yearbook to prove it if anybody sees. Young Mihaela.
I still look the same.
You do. Welcome, Mihaela Plesa. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you guys. Congratulations on the start of this amazing venture you guys are doing. I'm so excited to be on. I'm so excited to connect with y'all's listeners and get everybody excited because we have about a year to get everybody excited to get to the polls and have their voice heard. We cannot allow the same thing to keep happening.
That's right. And we also have another, a little 4.5 years almost before the big thing that's going to happen. What this podcast is all about is the next census. I mean, we all know that you're supposed to redistrict every 10 years. I mean, you just went through the mid-decade gerrymandering, which is wild, but we know it's coming again in just 5 more years. And with all the new population growth Texas has, the stakes could not be higher. I mean, we're expecting to get 4 to 5 new congressional seats. And that's going to have impacts throughout the Texas legislature as well, right?
Well, absolutely. And you have to remember that the legislature is where these maps are drawn, right? Texas doesn't have an independent redistricting commission. So it's essentially us that draw our maps, our congressional maps, all the maps, everything that you vote on, whether it's school board or whatever, that's drawn by us as state representatives, right? And so we need to make sure that we're creating maps that resemble the districts that they're supposed to represent. And we constantly in the state of Texas are fighting these maps in court. What is happening now is that you see legislatures, and it's not just Texas, but all over the nation, going in to do this mid-decade redistricting, essentially moving the goalposts, changing the rules mid-game in order to gain the system. Because unfortunately, Republicans have been governing so horribly that they feel like they need to cheat the system in order to stay in power as we go into our next election cycles, right? And so Texas isn't the only one, but we see other states. North Carolina just recently did mid-decade redistricting without a census. And look, having census data before you do a redistricting, before you draw new maps, this isn't a partisan issue. You have Republicans in California filing the same legislation, like an amendment that I carried on the House floor, to say, look, we're not going to do mid-decade redistricting without a census. Because at the census level is how we know how much money, how much resources, what all the things that we need to do the things that a state government should do. Keep the lights on, keep the water clean, keep people educated, healthy, and essentially in the workplace, right? And being great citizens of society. And so the census is very, very important and is being manipulated.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry for jumping right into the meat of it. I feel like we should back up. I mean, we have this great origin story where y'all went to the same elementary school. I want to hear more about kind of what happened after that picture to get you to where you're at today. Yeah.
Did young Mihaela say when she was asked what she wants to be when she grows up that she wants to be a state rep?
Look, I knew that I always knew. Well, look, I'll just back up. What's really interesting about the yearbook that you hold up is that in that yearbook, the name on that little girl is Mihaela Plesa. It's not my name, my name on my birth certificate, my God-given name by my mama, Mihaela Plesa. And that's because I went to school at a time when immigrant families, it was still pretty new. Like English second language was still pretty new. Collin County was becoming more diversified. More families were moving in, but it was still pretty, there were still farms and ranches in Plano and in Carrollton Farmers Branch and all this area when we were going to school. And I think what's really important is that, no, I never thought that I would be a state representative, but I always knew that I was something special about the community, because I knew, I felt the investment that my teachers made in me as a bilingual kid, right? I felt the investments that, counselors made in me when my parents were going through a divorce, right? So I always kind of felt special within my community. After college, when we graduated, I went to try to go make money and start a small business and, just live the American dream as the first generation daughter of immigrants. My mom told me, you live in America, anything that you want, you can achieve. And so I always thought maybe I would be something international, some kind of buying and selling of goods on an international level. I knew we were doing, fashion merchandising and design. So we were doing import export, but, no, I never really thought I was going to run for office until 2016, when I was just kind of, what is happening? And I got more involved. I'd always voted, but I got more involved marching, protesting, volunteering times with my time with different things around my community. And then that's really when I was like, hey, I should figure out how these lawmakers are doing the work that they're doing down in Austin and why it doesn't feel like it's a representative government. Because I had been voting. I had been doing all the things, contacting my state rep. I remember Wendy Davis doing her filibuster on the House floor. I had been involved, but yet still didn't feel represented when I came from a community that I always felt very seen, very heard, very nurtured, very cared for. So I just didn't understand the disconnect there, right? And so I literally just quit my job and went and took an unpaid internship job at 32 in the state capitol because I'm crazy. But I literally worked for state lawmakers for a couple of legislative sessions, 4 or 5 legislative sessions, worked for them and helped them pass their policy, learned how to be effective, learned how to be effective in the minority party. And then after a redistricting cycle, where Collin County was kind of forced to create a competitive district because of the growth, because of the diversification, because of just everything that you're seeing in Collin County, right? It's not just Plano, but Frisco and McKinney and all the new places, Anna, Prosper, right? They had to redraw a new district in Collin County. And, there's a lot of members in Collin County that have chairmanships and seniorities, and they had kind of seen some competitive races in 2018. It got very close for comfort. I think one of my colleagues only won with 300 and something votes. Another one of my colleagues in 2018 only won with 1,500 votes. So they had a choice to make. Do we have more competitive seats or more safe seats? And so that's basically how HD 70 happened. It's a gerrymandered district. If you look at it, we say it looks like a rabbit, but you can go online and look for yourself as to what you think the district looks like. But there should be more competitive districts in Collin County. Collin County House District 70 should not be the only swing district in Collin County. And so that's why gerrymandering is really important. That's why it was worth breaking quorum, because I have seen my district firsthand impacted by us as lawmakers having the power to draw our own maps and not putting it up to an independent redistricting commission.
Now, for those keeping track at home, on the scoreboard, before the 2020 census, you had 1 safe Republican seat and 2 competitive seats. And then after the gerrymander in 2020, they carved out this district where you now represent to be the competitive district to shore up the 2 seats that were competitive. So now we got County. 1 competitive one and 2 safe Republican ones.
Yeah, so Collin County is made up of 5 House districts, and we have 1 competitive swing district and 4 pretty safe and secure Republican seats.
But at Collin County as a whole, if you're just looking at the county, it's become a lot more competitive, and that's why they had to make these changes. And I think that can be really reassuring to people to feel like, well, my vote doesn't really actually matter. But in fact, it does, because the reason why your district exists is because of Joe Biden's performance in 2020.
Absolutely. My district, and also every vote matters because, like, when I won, I only won by 800 votes, right?
Initially, but then you've expanded it since then, right?
Yes. And we hope to continue doing the work. But in 22, we went up against lots of money and we only won by 800 votes, $4 million, and we won by 800 votes. We have more friends on Facebook than 800 people, right? So you can imagine that. And in my runoff, to get into my runoff, I only got there with 29 votes.
Wow.
So I'm sure we have some group chats that have more than 29 people in them, right? So when I tell you how important it is for everybody to get out to vote and to vote the entire ballot, because like a district like mine is a perfect example. At the top of the ticket, the district looks pretty comfortable. Joe Biden won it by 53%. You have Collin County that's performing very well in this district, Beto O'Rourke that's performing. But as you go down the ballot, people start leaving. People start, they've come and they voted for the tops of the ticket, the Kamala Harrises, the James Tallaricos, the Gina Hinojosas, right? We're so excited about these individuals. But what I try to remind everybody is the bottom of the ballot is closest to your front door. I'm going to come knock on your door and talk to you about what matters to you.
And you
know
have.
if James and Gina and Collin have the bandwidth to knock on everyone's door. But that's why it's very important that everybody votes every election and they vote the entire ballot.
And you've knocked thousands of doors. I guess my question is, and I'm going to give some attribution here. I reached out to a friend of mine, David De La Fuente. He wanted to ask you this. Collin County is over 50% adults with at least a bachelor's degree and very diverse. If you're looking at a comparison to Cobb County, like in Georgia, where it's 52% non-white, 50% bachelors, Collin County is 49% non-white and 55% bachelors. So the question is, even though it has obviously become more and more competitive, like, why is it still as GOP as it is?
So I think that this is a great question, and I get asked this question a lot. You don't need all the money. You just need some money, right? You need to be able to have some money to be able to communicate your message. And Republicans have become very comfortable. They've got a well-oiled machine up here in Collin County as to how they can get the cost per voter should be lower for them, right? The cost that it takes to have a voter come out to the polls, because it takes about 4 touches before someone has made a commitment, I'm going to go vote. That's just an average campaign thing, right? So I think what we're seeing is that gerrymandering has helped to suppress the vote, right? But when we have an opportunity, Democrats perform very, very well because of the things that you've said. This is a community that's becoming not more diverse just in ethnicity and culture and stuff, but like more diverse because people are coming, they're moving from Florida, they're moving from New York, so it's diverse, yes, racially and religious and all that, but it's also diverse just from people from all over the nation that have moved here, right? And the tying into educated, right? When you have higher education, you have higher voter involvement, right? And so those things go hand in hand. I have a very educated electorate. They ask me a lot of questions. They care about education. They care about the economy. They care about the price of insurance and things like that. They want to have those conversations. Part of the issue is it's very hard to vote in Texas, right? We're always changing the rules, and Collin County is a perfect example. This cycle, my constituents are hand bubbling in like a Scantron in Collin County. We spent over $3 million a couple of years ago to have new technology brought in. We have some of the safest elections in the state of Texas. Collin County has been put on a pedestal as having some of the safest elections, most secure elections in the state. And yet my constituents are going to go vote this election cycle for the constitutional amendments with a pen on a Scantron bubbling in. So, right, you see kind of like working against people, making it harder for them to cast a ballot. Lots of people have been taken off the voter rolls. So make sure if you're in Texas, you're checking your voter registration often, right? So it's kind of like a number of things. But at the end of the day, when we have competitive districts, when we have enough money to communicate our message that, yes, I'm for public safety. I carry the endorsement of the police and fire. I care about education. I carry the endorsement of teachers and social workers. I care about healthcare. I care about, the workforce. I work with my universities. Then we win. Then we have opportunities. The problem is that all these little kinks in the system, those are features. Those are not bugs. And so you as a voter must be committed to having your vote cast, because the institution is betting on you to get discouraged and just go, I'm going to stay home.
Well, I think that is similar to what I heard in Tarrant County, where they're closing polling sites even for this cycle. And it brings me to, I think, a fun comparison, because I keep hearing that Tarrant County, like, it's on the verge of flipping, just like Collin. And I keep hearing things about Collin County and how it's also on the verge of, as you're saying, with all these demographic changes. So, but I guess the problem in what we were hearing before with Tarrant County is just the, fewer resources than other blue areas like Dallas, fewer precinct chairs, maybe not as money coming up. So how would you compare, or maybe not compare, but at least your experience as far as that kind of organizational infrastructure?
Well, I definitely think that the county party matter. And I think that, when you see money coming into certain parts, it's kind of like frustrating, right? But I think that overall people power is really, really important. And what we've seen specifically in Southwest Collin County is when we create networks of community outreach that isn't partisan backed, right? So when you're going to the Rotaries, when you're going to your, whatever, the junior league or all these different events, you're building a, clout and trust and kind of like relationships deeper than just a typical campaign would allow you to do. And I think that's really, really important for areas like Collin County. And I think that's why you see the shift that you've seen specifically on school boards and city councils up here, right? Candidates that run very partisan platforms in these nonpartisan elections tend to not perform very well, right? And so we want to make sure that politics and politicians stick to the core, which is the people. And, I think that that's was shown by, winning by 800 votes, right? That's your, small network of friends at the junior league of Collin County.
Something I heard in my district when I ran was that it's a Chamber of Commerce district. And we're a pretty leaning heavily blue district, more so than it sounds like yours. And yet it was a very heavily, because we have a lot of chambers of commerce, a lot of small businesses, a lot of people who come here and work here. So do you have that as well in your area? Because I know you run on a very economic development platform.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I think Chamber of Commerce is kind of like a dog whistle or a soft way of saying these are Republicans that don't buy into this craziness that we've seen becoming the policy priorities of the Republican Party of Texas. Look, at the end of the day, our state still stands at the highest rate when it comes to uninsured people. We have vast popularity on both sides for expansion of healthcare options, whether you want to talk about Medicaid or Medicare or whatever. Those are Chamber of Commerce priorities, right? Expansion of healthcare, that's something that our business community wants. I remember that from when I was a small business owner, right? If my workforce wasn't healthy, if their families weren't healthy, if my worker had a sick kid, my worker's not coming into work. Right? So healthcare really is the foundation, healthcare and education. And what we see is that those Chamber of Commerces, they tend to be against the voucher programs. They tend to be against bills like the bathroom bill, right? I mean, these are not, nobody cares about that. We care about, are we going to get FIFA? Are we going to get Universal Studios building their theme park in Frisco? Right? That's what we're trying to work on. I'm not trying to create the potty police, and I don't think the Chamber of Commerce are trying to do that either. And so I think that it's what I think we need to have right now is just kind of an emperor's clothes, doesn't have clothes moment in politics. And I think that's what the quorum break essentially was for me, is that, look, you guys, y'all aren't even giving an opportunity for debate. Y'all aren't even having an opportunity from these constituents to be heard by you. A lot of times in these committees, members won't even look up from their phones, right? A lot of times when I'm giving, not all the time, because I'm not one of those members, I don't give a lot of like speeches on the floor. I'd much rather like get the amendments passed and the bills passed. You know, I'll talk to you.
You're
at
a
your
process girl, like me. Yeah,
I'll meet you at your desk, right? But sometimes, you know, when we're giving these speeches, a lot of times members aren't even looking up from their phones because, like I said, their districts are so gerrymandered that if you are not on their page on everything, they don't even feel like they have to talk to you. And that is where we've lost our power. I believe, you know, we should all have more competitive districts. We'd have a lot more conversation.
I was just going to say, you know, in the suburbs, especially in Collin County, where we have so many businesses and increasingly more business headquarters coming. Based on what you just said, it sounds like there's not even the distinction between business and labor that there used to be when we think of like the old days of politics. That a lot of these issues, it sounds like they're aligned because of just how far right the Republicans have moved. Like it is pro-business and pro-labor to be in favor of Medicaid expansion, right? So I just think, what have you noticed that the playbook is different in a district like yours, where there are such a concentration of businesses, versus a rural area of the state, or maybe even a more highly urbanized place like Dallas?
Well, I don't want to give away my secret recipe to the opposition, but I will tell you this. Look, I was born and raised in a mixed household, and by that I mean my mom tended to be more conservative and my dad tended to be more progressive. And they still very much communicated to each other. They still very much hung out with each other's friends. They very much still went into the same social circles as their friends, even though they might not have been politically aligned. I think that what we need to do as electeds or people that want to run for office is to show up in spaces that maybe we haven't before, and have conversations that maybe we haven't been as forthcoming with before. I don't tend to hide behind the bush. I'm very forward about who is pushing, you know, these vouchers, who is putting forward these bills that tend to close down our libraries, close down our schools, make healthcare, you know, more expensive. And I always try to meet my colleagues where they're at, or stakeholders that have an opposite, you know, perspective. I think conversation is very important, but I think what we've seen right now is that it's just mostly the party of Trump, right? And it's like whatever Trump wants, you know, and you just got to make a decision in yourself whether or not you're representing your district, whether it's Senate district, House district, whatever, or you're just a Trump person, just for Trump. And there's completely different there, because Trump's priorities are not necessarily going to be the priorities of Collin County or the priorities of my 200,000 people that I represent in Collin County. And so there are some things that I'll admit I agreed with Trump on, right? And that's okay to say that. It's also okay to say, I disagree with this. And that's the beauty of democracy. That's the beauty of the Republic of America. I think that's what's scary, is that the people who are for Trump, they want to bypass the judicial system. They want to bypass the legislative branch. They want to bypass the voters. They're just willing to do anything. I mean, look at the demolition of the White House.
White House, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's like, look, you want to remodel? That's fine. I want to remodel. And there have been lots of presidents before that have made, you know, redone the White House, but it's like the process, right? And that's, I think, where we as elected officials need to respect the integrity of the House, the integrity of the judicial system, the integrity of our Supreme Court. I mean, look at Ken Paxton, the abuse of his office. But then what happened? I guess, we try to impeach Ken Paxton and do the right thing. And then it's just once again. And so I think, look, I just hope that my colleagues realize that the decisions that they're making, even when they know and they tell me I'm against that, but I'm really scared of my primary voter, I'm really scared I'm not going to get this Trump endorsement. It's just got to be more than that at some point. It's just got to be bigger.
All right, lightning round. Let's be controversial as Democrats. What are the things we agree with Trump on? I hope he remembers what he talked about on the campaign trail about capping interest rates for credit cards at 10%. I would love that. I think that would be huge. I have seen firsthand in my own family how credit card debt can be really spiraling.
100, and I'll go one further. I'll say when I first was like in high school and in college, I worked as a waitress, that no tax on tips, man. When you're making $2.75 an hour.
Where were you a server?
Oh my God, all over the place. I worked at Bluefin Tuna. There's a sushi place right up here that was like a tuna sushi place. And just all over, just little, I think Super Salad, was one of my jobs.
Super Salad, yeah.
So was I, Mihaela. I was a Super Salad waitress.
Okay, and you remember we made like no money there.
Olive Garden and Cracker Barrel. Very different experiences.
Yeah. So I think, when you're working for $2 an hour, I'm totally for that, right? Trump, when he came out and he was like, we should make IVF something that is affordable, I was all for that, right? Because I've been very open with my infertility journey and, how hard it's been not only to go through the IVF cycles, but to pay for them. And then once you get your, eggs or embryos or whatever, to keep them frozen is an extra cost, right? So I was all for that as well. I was looking forward for that policy.
Yeah. Well, I haven't mentioned this on the podcast, but you know this, Mihaela. I went through IVF and had my beautiful baby girl who's in the background here. And I was for that too, because I had an insurance that it wouldn't cover IVF. And so that was all out of pocket. All out of pocket. So I was for that as well.
But so look, the tax on tips thing that got passed in the big, beautiful bill is not as advertised. It's pretty limited. That shouldn't stop us as Democrats from saying, what if we actually did it? IVF thing, it might not actually materialize. I hope it does. We should take the issue if he doesn't. If Trump doesn't fulfill the promise on credit card interest, we should.
I 100% agree. But look, like like some of my family tell me, and Todd tells me too, he's like, a stop clock can be right twice a day too. So, like, I don't want to give Trump too much credit, but, what I do mean by that is that I do think it's important for us as Democrats or as elected officials, whether you're a Republican in a 60-plus Republican district, I think it's important for them to hear and speak to constituents that don't always agree with them. I have to do that. I represent a swing district. It's good for me. I enjoy the conversations. So that's kind of, I think, my goal at the end of the day is just to show that we can still be strong Dems. We can still be, progressive fighters fighting for the right things. But I'm not going to at the end of the day, I want to serve my constituencies and I want to make sure that I'm effective, not only getting elected in the House.
And if there was one issue, I think that stood out more than any other in the last presidential election was cost of living and inflation. Whether it was fair to peg all Democrats as responsible for that or not, I think what we saw worldwide was if you were the party in power, voters were mad and they wanted to take it out on you. Whether you were a conservative party or liberal party, it didn't really matter. If you were in charge, you were going to lose seats in your respective legislature, right, around the world. But we're seeing now, with tariffs and everything, I don't think the Trump administration has kept their eye on the ball for affordability at all. I think that's why you see candidates like Mamdani in New York who are relentlessly focused on affordability, who are really upending a lot of expectations. Like we see conservatives and self-identified Republicans saying, "I'm going to vote for Mamdani because he's going to make my life better." So I'm not trying to say let's all run as Zoran Mamdani in Texas. What I'm saying is there is something to this idea of issues that can transcend the categories we think of. And so I want to ask you, as someone who has done the work to flip a seat, like where do you see the effort needing to move to get us out of this long curse of losing statewide? Where are those issues that can transcend?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to create a space where people want to run for office, right? I will tell you, with the political rhetoric that has been happening lately, with the horrible assassinations that we have seen in our state and attempted assassinations, I can see why people don't want to run for office, and I can see why people want to retire now. We see that. So I just encourage everybody, whatever your passion is, if you've ever thought I should run for office, look into it, do your research and do it, right? Because it's the most rewarding thing I've been able to do with my life is talk to a constituent that we've, been able to make their life better, whether it was helping them get their kid on, the Medicare waiver, right? Or helping a small business recover monies that they lost, right? So that's super rewarding. I think that what happens in Texas is we run as a block, like Texas Democrats, and it's like all the same messaging, right? And it's like the same messaging in Collin County and the same messaging in Bexar County and the same messaging in Williamson County. And we're all running on, abortion and healthcare and education and guns, right? And it's the same thing, right? And I think that we all have some core issues like that, but that top line isn't going to work in everybody's district. I think what Mamdani is doing in New York is fantastic because I think it's awesome when people are excited about going out and voting, right? I think that should be important on either side. And as someone who's been a student of history, I think it's really fascinating the ebbs and flow of our political system, right? It's supposed to be, we have this dance, this tango between the Republicans and the Democrats. What I think is not talked about, and I'm going to say something really controversial right now.
Uh-oh. Drum roll.
Lay it on us.
I've been kind of thinking how I'm going to bring this up because I had kind of made a comment on a Facebook post, and I think that we're not really talking about the elephant in the room. I think Kendall touches on this a little bit, but look, when I decided to run for House District 70, I had a very strong foundation as to why I was running. I had so many conversations with my community that I didn't need a poll to tell me what my mailer should say because the poll was at the door when I was knocking 100 doors a day. The conversations I was having on the phone when I was, asking people to please contribute to my campaign, and I was doing so on the grassroots level. So local donors, $100 right here in my community. I think what happens is people get into these places as candidates and they're super overwhelmed, especially in a competitive district. When you're a socialist, when you're converting all the kids to whatever, furries, I don't even know.
Accusations, right?
Yeah. When they're putting the black and white picture of you hugging Nancy Pelosi or whatever it is that they're doing to come at you, it's very overwhelming. And if you don't have a strong conviction and if you don't have a strong sense of your own district, then it's very easy to be influenced by people who come in with magic beans and say, if you put out 27 mailers if you fundraise this much, if you get this digital firm, you don't need to block walk. We're going to hire a bunch of people to block walk for you. And then you kind of lose what it's supposed to be about, which is like you're representing your district and you're hiring these people and saying, no, it's not just public education that my district cares about. It's this very specific thing. It's recapture, right? That is affects my district. So when they get a mailer or they get a text from me or they get a volunteer that is out their door talking, it's not your typical top lines. It's, hey, most of your property taxes go back to the state in recapture. That's Governor Abbott taking your money and not fully funding our schools, right?
And going to some charter school that you have no idea what they're doing with the money. Yeah.
Right.
So as Democrats, we have to not only allow candidates like yourself to run a more specific campaign for your specific district, we should be encouraging them to, because that's what's going to work.
Yeah, and the consultants and the vendors and all those people that are supposed to help amplify our message should be there to help do just that. Figure out what that message is. And that's going to take a little bit more time. Yeah, you know what? You might not be able to do 10 campaigns as a mail house. You might only have time to do 5. But guess what? You're going to win all those 5. The problem is that, it's just like the Republicans. Like, the Republicans are currently buying bots and comments and influencers online to shape their narrative. They're investing. So it's kind of like, where are we going to invest our money? How are we going to spend the money? In 22, I had $500,000 and an army of people behind me willing to, give this district to the people. My opponent had $4 million and, relied on consultants and relied on, a lot of people kind of telling them what to do. I just think that when we run those soul campaigns, we have a better tendency of winning.
So is the controversy there, though, that you think that maybe we're running two one-size-fits-all races across the state and we're allowing outside maybe consultants to dictate what we're doing here within our own communities that we know better?
Yeah, I think they call it political science for a reason. It's a science, right? And so I think it can get really overwhelming when you're a new candidate. Like if you're a mom or you're just like a normal person and you don't have really a background in what you're doing and you come in and people are telling you, okay, we're going to do a poll. The poll is $25,000, right? These are your questions, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like the same poll and it's kind of done everywhere. And it's the same framing of the questions. And then you kind of get these numbers back and you're kind of like, what do they mean? And so then you're trying to figure out kind of like, what is this poll telling me? And it can be very daunting for an individual, right? And, I was very hard-headed when it came to things like that for my campaign. I was very welcoming in knowing the information, but at the end of the day, I was not going to put out a message that I did not think that my constituents cared about and that, didn't resonate with them. And, maybe we can still care about healthcare access, but maybe that's not the number one issue in some of these areas. Maybe if you live in the medical district, right, that's not the thing that you're necessarily caring about. Maybe it's your insurance costs that are the thing that should be the top line of that mailer, right? Maybe you have a specific issue in your district that's around water, right? And that's the thing that people are paying attention to. So like I said, Texas is a very big, beautiful state, and I'm very proud. And I just don't think that the race that I'm running in HD 70 in Collin County is the same race that we should be running in House District 118 in Bexar County. We are both competitive districts, right? We are both 52% whatever at the top. That does not mean that the Democrat running in 118 should be running the same message as the Democrat in 170. In 70.
I think if we stop thinking about ourselves as a state with one identity as a party, that would be helpful. I mean, Texans love to brag that geographically we're bigger than France, right? we would not expect a politician in one part of France to have the exact same message as a politician in another part of France. But for some reason, because we're in the same state, that we expect the candidate in Austin or San Antonio or Houston or El Paso or Dallas or up in Collin County to have the same sheet of music. And that doesn't make any sense.
No, and I think it also takes away from the diversity of our party and what makes us as Texas Democrats really so unique, right? Because we can take from all over the state and our experiences and really craft meaningful legislation for Texans, right? But I think that us as candidates, we got to become more sure of ourselves, why we decided to run, kind of like, the internal whisper, and stay true to that and not be, pushed one way or the other by who you've hired to help you win. And I also think us as donors, us as activists, us as the ones that are going out and contributing to campaigns and stuff, we got to remember that, look, and I'm just going to be really frank right now. When voting rights were under attack, it was the Texas legislature, it was the House of Representatives, Texas Democrats that broke quorum the first time. And then the second time, and now this third time, right? It was us in the state house that built the bipartisan coalition to kill the voucher scam in the 88th session, right? So it's the legislative branch in the House where the buck essentially stops, where the fight is. I get really, really defensive when I see people only care about the top of the ticket and investing their time and treasure in the top of the ticket. I think that we are doing a huge disservice. I think the Republicans have caught on to this. That's why you see these expensive school board races and city council races and $1 million house races like the one I ran in 22, right? They are ready and they know where to lean in, and we just kind of like sometimes run on vibes. And it's very frustrating because our down ballot candidates, those House members in 2018 that ran, like Retta Bowers and Anna Maria Ramos and John Rosenthal, that nobody thought they would ever win their races in 2018. Imagine if we would have invested just a little bit more in those races, right? And it's just lucky that we hit that beautiful marker in 2018 and had this big, opportunity so that they couldn't gerrymander us out of those wins in 2020, because they sure tried. Let's not forget what they did when they redrew the maps is they paired a bunch of Democrats together and they did all kinds of shenanigans and they did what they did in House District 70. So I just say, look, we have to invest in our House races because the Republicans have invested in these races. They're taking out their own. Greg Abbott took
They're primarying each other.
Yeah.
And if we're going to be a serious, self-respecting party, we have to have a plan to take back the legislature, right? Like, we can't say, oh, the Republicans do bad policy and they're making life bad for Texans without trying to take it back from them, right? Like, it's like, well, we're not going to run enough candidates to where we'll have the majority, even if we win. It's like, well, then are you actually upset with the Republican legislature? I mean, I'm not laying that on you because your job is to win your district. My point is, going back to your point, we need people to step up and run for office. And now is the best time you could, because this is the cycle, right?
I 100% agree. And I get frustrated with that too, because it's kind of like we go in every year and we have to elect a speaker, and we know like this is the guy who's going to sit up there with the gavel and he's going to put you on a committee and he's going to make sure that your bill dies or fails. And you're sitting there and you're like, damn it, I really want to pass Everly's Law for the Talman family, right? Like, I've knocked on their door. We've been working on this. So for lawmakers, it's a really hard decision. Why are you there? Are you there to, and what is your play going to be? And I've told this to my colleagues. We can't all run the same play. We can't all be the quarterback, right? We can't all be, I don't know sports very well. I'm just going to say, start saying because they're like tight end. I don't know. But we can't all be, so we have to have an understanding of what our part is. and how we can be most effective, right? There are lawmakers that they're in 70 plus districts, they can be out there having conversations that maybe it doesn't represent my district for me to do that.
So, I mean, our podcast ultimately is about flipping the entire state. And I think one of the questions we have is low voter turnout. And one of the kind of hypotheses we have is that in a district like yours, where you are doing 4 touches a door, or you're out there 100 doors a day, like you are getting people out, like you are getting a lot of probably a higher voter turnout than say the districts that are so overly gerrymandered that people are just like, whatever. Is that a sense that you have? And how do we turn out? It sounds like to me, from what you're saying, it is messaging. It's people stepping up in those hard races. Is there anything else that you think that we should be doing as Texans to turn out that vote?
Yeah. So I have a lot of opinions on this too. If you go and look at where we have these competitive races, you tend to see a higher turnout rate because we've made large investments in those races, right? We're spending tens of thousands of dollars on texting, hundreds of thousands of dollars on mail. If you're, a representative in a cheaper media market, you might even have commercials out there, right? People are like, why don't you have commercials? I'm like, I'm in DFW. It's $1 million for a 6-second bit, right? You can even say my name in 6 seconds. So I think that, for us, what we need to do if we want to be serious about flipping Texas, if you're in one of these super blue districts, you still need to be working your district. We see a lot of the low voter turnout in blue counties, in blue areas, in blue cities, right? And we can go back and look at the patterns, and we can see years that like Dallas County has dropped, or Bexar County has dropped, or Harris County has dropped. The reason they mess with Harris County so much is because an election can essentially be won on the state's level in Harris County if we could just get our shit together, right? But the problem is that, like I said, look, this is a gig that doesn't pay. It pays $7,000 a year. So I totally understand, you got to get back to your district, and you got to get to work, and you got to raise money so that you can do your side gig, which is being a state representative. But if we want to win on a statewide ballot, if James wants to win, if Gina wants to win, we need to turn out our Dems. We need to turn out our moderates. We need to register new voters. And we need to have candid conversations with Republicans who don't see themselves as MAGA. And that's how we will have a blue Texas. I believe that I will see it in my lifetime. I really do. I really do. I see them in my interns that are coming in that are super inspired by what they're seeing. I hear all the time when I go and speak. People are super inspired by, our story here of the win that we were able to achieve. And it's not partisan. It really isn't. I get a lot of Republicans, moderates, independents, libertarians. I have a lot of libertarian buddies, that come to me and they're like, hey, I really appreciated you voted for this or that. Cannabis was a big one, right? There's other little things here or there. And I think, look, we have to win. We have to win because the legislature, we're spending 140 days and we are talking about crazy stuff. Like
bathrooms. Yeah.
Well, so when you start the day, you go through prayer, you go through, invocation, you're going through the Pledge of Allegiance, you're doing resolutions, congratulatory memorial resolution. We have fights over that. People aren't standing on a memorial resolution. We're fighting over just to fight. And I think that we have forgotten as lawmakers that we should be fighting for the people, not fighting against each other. And it's just, I think once we start having those conversations, people, they are tired of it. They are tired of it. They are losing their benefits. I have 2 food banks in my district I have the North Texas Food Bank in my district that are freaking out right now.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, and then we're about to have SNAP benefits go away with the closure, and we're going to experience millions of Americans without food. Right now is the day. Like that's why we created this podcast, is so that we can flip the state and hopefully hear more from people like you to do that. And you gave us a lot here today, Mihaela. My Rosemead Roadrunner colleague and former alumni. So just to wrap up, we have one final closing question, which is if people want to support you, which they should, having heard you, where can they go to support you?
Well, we have our website. Obviously, it's flisafortexas.com, and you can sign up for our newsletter and all that good stuff. Keep up with us on all of our social media. It's the same, Flisa for Texas, but we're going to be having a campaign kickoff here in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. I encourage everybody to show up. And like I said, look, the way we win is two things. You pick a cause, like pick a candidate, who's your candidate, and stay consistent in helping that candidate out. We've got 365 days almost until the election of 2026. It's going to be a really critical, important election for our state. It's an opportunity for us to pick up more seats in the state house. We have all seen how important our state legislature is. I'm so proud to be a Texas Democrat. When I tell the pride I have, the movement that we have started on a national level as a Texas Democrat, everybody should be proud to be a Texas Democrat. If you identify as one, you should be really proud of your party right now, because this fight that you're seeing for healthcare in Congress, that was because of Texas Democrats showing what a fight should look like, right? All these other legislature, Missouri had a sleep in. They had lawmakers in Missouri that slept on their floor of their house. That was because of Texas Democrats. California Prop 50, Texas Democrats. So look, if there's been any moment, now is the time to show up, to put out your yard sign, because people are paying attention and they're seeing that this isn't about a woke liberal agenda. This is about Social Security. This is about nutritional SNAP benefits. This is about healthcare, right? This is about our schools. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm just so excited to have the opportunity to talk to you guys and look forward to seeing y'all on the campaign trail.
We will come knock doors. Thank you, Mihaela. We will see y'all next week, and God bless Texas.
You can follow us on all socials at Mission Texas Podcast. Email us at missiontexaspodcast@gmail.com. This episode is edited by Juan Jose Flores. Our music bumper is by Adam Pickerel, and our cover art is by Tina Sohn.